dayenu, 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 dayenu.
Chag Sameach, everyone. Happy Pesach. So again, we can't be together this year for our annual community Seder in the synagogue, but we can always carry the spirit of Judaism and make it more spiritual, and we can have connections together through this miracle of Zoom. The Seder is a festival of freedom. And if you ask most people, what is Pesach about? We're celebrating our freedom from slavery and the fact we didn't have enough time to let our matzah rise in the desert, and that's why we eat matzah, but it's more than that. It's a celebration of community. It's a celebration of our freedom. It's a chance for us to all look around us and see the freedom that we enjoyed and what makes our lives so good and so blessed, especially during this last year. Freedom is also about looking at other people who are not free, and we promise you it's not going to be boring. And the theme here is that we're going to do everything in fours, so you'll notice that theme throughout our Seder. So welcome, Chag Sameach, and we're about to begin. So the cantor will now begin the Seder by reciting the order of all of the things that we're going to be covering through our virtual Seder this evening.
Kadesh urchatz karpas yachatz magid rochza motzi matzah maror korech shulchan orech safun barech Hallel nirtzah.
So as we talked about earlier, we've tried tonight to follow the theme of fours. It is now time for us to light the special candles, the candles of Pesach. And we have four of our congregants who will bring in the spirit of Pesach. And we hope that you will bring the light into your homes, and hopefully we will send the light out into the world.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvosov v'tzivonu lahadlik ner shal Yom Tov.
Cups of wine, and the first cup of wine, the blessing will be recited by Mike Swernoff.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabanu mikol am v'romamanu, mikol lashon b'kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'titem lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava, moadim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim l'sason, et yom chag hamatzot hazeh, zaman cherutenu mikra kodesh, Zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, kivanu v'charta v'yotanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim u'moadei kodshecha, b'simcha v'sason hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh Yisrael, v'hazmanim. L'chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, שהחיינו וקימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה, לזמן הזה. Amen. L'chaim.
So everything on the Seder plate has a purpose. We have on the Seder plate maror, which reminds us of the bitterness of our slavery. We have charoseth, a concoction that feels a little bit like the mortar that the Jewish people used to build the pyramids. Some of us have lettuce, which in the old days was a little bit more bitter than the lettuce that we have now. We have a bone that reminds us of the animal that the blood was given to place on the thresholds and on the doorposts of our homes. And of late, in the last few decades, there's been the addition of an orange on the Seder plate. The orange reminds us of those that we've left behind, and it calls upon us to think who in our lives, our friends, our family, in our communities, is there anyone who we've left behind? We're about to recite the prayer over karpas, a green vegetable. There's a number of reasons why we do this. We've made it through a cold winter, and now we have the chance to bless something that's green. It's a sign of greenness, of growth, of renewal, of springtime.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam borei peri ha'adamah.
So it's now time to take the middle matzah, you break it. It's called the afikoman. And in Greek, that means the dessert matzah. So we're going to go on with our Seder after this. And then you have to guess, because we're not allowed to finish our Seder until we eat from the afikoman. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the afikoman. And those of you who have seen Blue's Clues, we're going to give you clues throughout the Seder of where the rabbi has hid the afikoman. And I'm going to go hide it. Aramaic. Halach ma'anya. We're supposed to remember that all who are hungry come and eat. And we're supposed to remember that we're supposed to flatten our souls this time of the year to think of the simpler things: family, food, shelter. So we're going to call upon Maddie Rubenstein, who will be reciting the Halach Ma'anya. She is the executive director of Nash, the food bank that serves the Glen Cove and the surrounding area.
This is the bread of affliction, which our ancestors ate in the land of Mitzrayim. All who are hungry, let them enter and eat. All who are in need, let them come and celebrate Pesach. Now we're here, next year in the land of Israel. Now we are enslaved. Next year we'll be free.
The Torah tells us that when our children ask us, what are we doing sitting around the table? We're supposed to answer their questions. And the 4 questions, known as the Manishtana, provide the cornerstones, the 4 corners of why we're here and why we're celebrating and what makes this night different than all other nights.
different from all other nights. On all other nights we eat either leavened or unleavened bread. Tonight, why do we eat only matzah, unleavened bread?
On all other nights, we eat any kind of vegetable and herbs. Tonight, why do we eat maror?
On all other nights, we do not dip herbs even once. Tonight, why do we dip twice? On all other nights, we sit eating or leaning. Tonight, why do we eat leaning?
The rabbi has just gone to hide the afikomen. Ooh, where do you think he could have hid it? The first clue is it's in something rectangular. Why don't you think about it, and we'll come back in a few minutes.
It's now time for us to remember and to go back many thousands of years to the times that we were slaves. The reason that we read this, Abadim Hayina, we used to be slaves, is not only does it remind us how much that we have to be grateful for today, we also remember our tradition from back then, and we also remember just a little bit, who is it in the world now that is enslaved, so that we understand the suffering and the slavery of others then and today.
We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, but God took us out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. We were once slaves, but now we are free people.
It's now time for us in our Seder to read from the section traditionally known as the Four Sons. We don't believe that we should be teaching these traditions only to our sons, but to all of our children. It's up to teachers to teach the story of Pesach in a wonderful way, not for the children to be put into categories. So we're calling upon a number of our young teens who would tell us in their lives what is the best way that they can learn. What are the teachers that have inspired them to learn not only the story of Pesach, but to strive and to rise in life?
The teacher that impacted my life the most was my Mandarin teacher, Miss Lee. She's been teaching us for 4 years, and she makes all aspects of learning fun, even when the material is really hard. Every year since I was in 7th grade, we've been making Mandarin movies for NYU competitions, and one year we even won 2nd place, and she gives us all the responsibility to put the movie together by ourselves, and she helps us a little bit along the way. She trusts us with a lot of responsibility, and it helps me and the rest of my class become better people.
One teacher that really impacted my life is my high school English teacher, Miss Stanton. She just always made me try really hard. She was the one who helped me try harder classes and to just always do my work and just be a student in the class. And I'm really thankful for her and for everything that she's done. And, I wouldn't be where I am in Israel today without her. So.
A professor I'd like to thank is Dr. Debbie Cherney. Not only did I take her course, I also was a teaching assistant for her course. She's my faculty advisor and my research mentor. She really just made my whole college experience possible. Not only was she really helpful with her class material, her office door was always open until COVID, when everyone had to go home, but then she was always available by Zoom to answer questions, whether it was school related or just you needed life advice. And she made a lot of opportunities possible for me. She made it possible for me to study abroad and complete a senior research thesis. And so she's always inspired me to be the kind of person to make sure my door is always open for people who need me and to be there and help anyone and always be kind and a warm person for anyone in need. So thank you, Dr. Cherney, for really making my college experience what it was.
Hi, I just want to come on here to thank my 11th grade biology teacher, Mr. DeRose, for everything that he's done for me. He's really impacted my life in such a positive way. Every day he inspires me to be a better student and person. I pushed myself really, really hard last year and now this year as a independent study for science research. I don't know where I would be without him. He helped me get into my dream school, and he's helping me make my dreams come true by...
The Hisha Amdo, the next section that we're going to be reading in our Seder, talks about that God has given us strength to every generation. In every generation.
שעמדה לאבותינו, והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, עמד עלינו לכלותנו.
God's promise has given us strength. For not only one enemy has risen against us to destroy us, but in every generation people rise against us, but the Holy One saves us from their hand.
עמד עלינו לכלותנו, והקדוש ברוך הוא ממעלנו מצילנו מהאדם, והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו
This is the part of the Seder which is usually boring. We're going to have a number of our young people tell the story, the essence of what it is. And we hope that through the mouths and through the actions of our young people, we capture the gist of the story of how we moved from the desert and from Israel to Egypt and slavery and beyond.
The beginning. Our family left Canaan because of the famine and went down to Egypt for food. We settled there and became a large and prosperous people. Then a new Pharaoh came to power. He didn't like us and made our lives miserable. He made us slaves.
Those Egyptian taskmasters are so mean. They make us work so hard. They were killing us, literally.
We cried to God. We cried. We were separated from our family. Our boy babies were being killed. We called upon God to help us. God, why do we have to be slaves making bricks for pyramids? Please help us get out of this.
Wait, I think God hears us.
Yes, God does hear us. He has the power to save us. Wait for his magic. It will come soon.
Welcome back. I have a second clue for you. It's somewhere where we put the Torah.
We now move to a new ritual in our Seder. In recent years, and I want you to start thinking about this, is there a woman in your life who has made an incredible impact on your life? It's time that we honor women at our Seder. I always think, as we sit down at the Seder table, that there are 6 women without which this story would not have happened. We would not be here tonight. I think about Yocheved, Moses' mother. She decided against all of the odds and against the threats of Pharaoh to have a child. Miriam, Moses' sister, looked after Moses as he was in his basket in the Nile River. Batya took him out of the water and raised him, even though she was an Egyptian princess, raised him as her own. Puah and Shiphrah were Egyptian midwives that refused to follow Egypt's orders, Pharaoh's orders, to throw children and kill them, especially males, into the Nile River. And also Tzipporah, Moses' wife, that when he was down and didn't want to take on his mission, she said to him, "You can do it." So we praise right now the women of our tradition that made this story possible. Take an empty glass and a cup of water, and we'll give you a few moments. And if you take that water and just pour it into a special cup called the Cup of Miriam, and let's think for a moment, who is the woman, who are the women in your lives that have brought you to this time in your lives of freedom? So it's now time that we think about the 10 plagues that God afflicted upon the Egyptians. So everybody, it seems, has a different tradition of how we mark the plagues. In my tradition, we would always put a fork into our wine 10 times. You know why? Because the fork creates tears. Not all the Egyptians were bad, and we never should take one group of people and say everyone is bad. But when we remember this tradition of tears, nobody likes to inflict suffering on another person or another people. And the 10 plagues were dam, blood, Sfardea, frogs, kinim, vermin, hadov, beasts, dever, plague of cattle, shechin, oils, barad, hail, harbe, locusts, choshech, darkness, makad bechorot, plague of the firstborn. Just spend some time remembering the plagues of thousands of years ago, but there are still plagues amongst us. And we're going to call upon some of our teens because they're going to exercise and let us know there's in their souls what it is that troubles them in the world and the plagues that plague us to this very day.
I feel like one of the modern plagues is the addiction to social media, because lots of kids right now are more focused on social media than socializing with their friends.
A modern day plague is inequality. And I think this because everywhere there's inequality within the education system and race and gender, and it all stems from the lack of opportunities for certain peoples.
I think one of the modern plagues today is intolerance. I'm saying that because if you look at today's society, especially in the recent times, you see people are having trouble dealing with people of other races and other religions.
My modern plague is a distortion of reality. The media constructs and society accepts unrealistic expectations, leading to eating disorders and an unhealthy obsession with appearance for both men and women.
I remember many years ago before Patty and I moved to the United States, and somebody suggested to us, why don't you have a Seder for the seniors? Why don't we all bring them downstairs and have a Seder? And I remember all of these seniors around the table, and they were sleeping or they were leaning back or they weren't totally there. But when we started to sing Dayenu, they all woke up and they all started to sing Dayenu. And for those few moments, they connected with what we like to call here their DNA. Their DNA, the Dayenu that's in all of our souls. We all know this, Dayenu, Dayenu, Dayenu. We're going to call upon so many of our congregants, and we're all going to sing together, Dayenu.
הוציאנו ממצרים, הוציאנו ממצרים, דיינו. אילו נתן לנו את התורה, נתן לנו את התורה, דיינו. אילו נתן לנו את השבת, נתן לנו את השבת, דיינו.
אלו הכניסנו לארץ ישראל, הכניסנו לארץ ישראל, דיינו. דיינו,
Now we have our last clue for you. I hope this one helps you solve it. It's somewhere that has a curtain, but a very special curtain. It's usually velvety or sometimes has stars of David on it. I wonder what it could be. Do you know?
This is the part of the Seder which we like to call show and tell, where we point to Pesach, the lamb bone where the blood came from, where God passed over our homes. So Matzah, we remember to flatten our souls, to get rid of all the bloat in our souls, to remember that the Jewish people were rushed as they left Egypt. So we point to the matzah, and maror is the bitter herbs. We as Jewish people have not always had a sweet and perfect life. So it's important that we go back there and we remember what we've suffered, and it gives us ever more the reason to rejoice in the lives that we have now.
Pesach, matzah, maror. Rabbi Gamliel used to say, if on Passover you do not explain these three things, you have not fulfilled the purpose of the Seder. Pesach, the Passover offering, matzah, the unleavened bread, and maror, the bitter herbs. What is the meaning of Pesach? The roasted bone, or beet, reminds us of the Passover sacrifice that our ancestors offered in the temple in Jerusalem. As it is written, you shall say, it is the Passover offering for Adonai, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Mitzrayim and punished the Egyptians. Why do we eat matzah? Because the Torah tells us they baked the dough and that they had brought it out of Mitzrayim into unleavened bread. For they were driven out of Mitzrayim and could not delay, nor had they prepared any food for their journey. Why do we eat bitter maror? It is because the Egyptians made the lives of our ancestors miserable in Mitzrayim. As it is written, they made life bitter for them with hard work, with clay and bricks, and with all kinds of work in the field. Whatever work they did was backbreaking.
In every generation, it is our duty to think of ourselves as though we personally had come out of Egypt. As it is written, you shall tell your children on that day, this is because of what God did for me when I came out of Mitzrayim.
So it's now time to say a blessing over the second cup of wine. And this is representative of God's promise to the Jewish people. I will deliver you from slavery. And as
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
It's now time for us to officially eat the ceremonial food, the most famous food of all of Pesach. We eat matzah. Again, matzah reminds us that this time of the year we need to flatten our souls, let go of the bloat, our stubbornness, anything that puffs us up a little bit too big. So we say blessings, two blessings, and thank you for giving us the mitzvah to eat matzah at Pesach.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al ahidlat matzah.
So it's now time to perform another mitzvah, and that's to say the prayer over maror, the bitter herbs.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror.
So the rabbis put together something called the Hillel sandwich, named after our great sage. So if your tradition is, for example, to use bitter herbs or maybe a piece of bitter lettuce, take a little bit of that and then put on top of it the charoseth, the apples and walnuts and honey and whatever your tradition is. We put them together and it reminds us of the balance of life. And as we eat together a Hillel sandwich. So this is the traditional time in our Seder where we sit down and we have a big sumptuous meal with lots of friends and family. That's not possible this year, but we want to actually continue our Seder so there's not this big break for whether you have a meal prepared or not. So we're going to actually continue with our Seder. You have full permission to eat now, and we don't mind if you're on the screen eating whatever you've prepared, or whatever your tradition under Zoom, under this new world, please follow that. But we're now going to... Now that we've finished our meal, it's time to find and eat the afikoman. Where do you think it is?
Now we have our last clue for you. I hope this one helps you solve it. It's somewhere that has a curtain, but a very special curtain. It's usually velvety or sometimes has stars of David on it. I wonder what it could be. Do you know? Did you guess the Aron Kodesh? If you did, then you were right. It's the Aron Kodesh where we keep the Torahs in the sanctuary. That's where the rabbi hid the afikoman. Good job.
Let's follow that. But we're now going to continue with, as we say the blessings over the third cup of wine, as God says, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei Peri Hagafen.
As children growing up, we all know this part of the Seder. Somebody fills the cup of Elijah. What we try to do at this point, and it's a new tradition, it's a Kabbalistic tradition, where we fill the cup of Elijah as close to the top as possible. What I'd like you to do is to pass the wine, the glass of wine, from person to person. And what I'd like you to do is, as the wine comes to you or you're by yourself, put your wishes into the cup of Elijah. Elijah's cup reminds us that there's a better world coming. We call it the Messiah, whether that's a person or a better world, a perfect world. What are your wishes for the next year, especially as we come out the other end of COVID? What have we remembered over the last year? How are we going to make our lives a little better?
Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishvi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi, Vimera v'yamenu, Yavu Eleinu, Im Mashiach ben David, Im Mashiach ben David.
Spring is here. So we sit back and we recline a little bit, and it's time to do some informal singing. I remember, at our Seder tables when we were growing up, we had uncles and parents, and they're sitting and they're laying back and singing these wonderful songs. We're going to do a few samples of some of these songs that are at the end of the Seder.
Ki lo na'eh, ki lo ya'eh, adir bimlucha, bachur kalacha, gedudav yomru lo lecha, ulecha, lecha, ki lecha, lecha, af lecha, lecha Adonai, hamamlacha, ki lo na'eh, ki lo na'eh, dagu bimlucha, Hadur kalacha, vatikav yomru la lecha, ulecha, lecha, ki lecha, lecha, av lecha, lecha Adonai, hamamamlacha, ki lo na'eh, ki lo ya'eh. Adir hu yivne veito vekarov, bimera, bimera, Be'ameinu ve'karov el bnei veitcha ve'karov bachur hu gadol hu dagul hu ibne veito ve'karov bimera ve'ameinu ve'karov el bnei ve'itcha ve'karov.
Let's go to the last verse.
רחום הוא, שדי הוא, תקיף הוא, יבנה ביתו בקרוב, במהרה, במהרה, וימינו בקרוב, אל בני ביתך בקרוב.
So when, I don't know about in your home, but this was, we got to count to 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 13. So,
we're going to skip a little bit.
I think we're going to skip a little bit.
Okay.
So you know what? We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's one God. There are 2 tablets. There are 3 fathers in our tradition, 4 mothers, 5 books of the Torah. And you know what? We'll jump to 13 at the end. Now, I don't
years
know.
of bar mitzvah.
13 years of bar mitzvah, 12. Well, we're going to count down. And I'll tell you what, in my house, we never were able to get past 7, but we tried to do all 13 in one breath. It is impossible, but you know what? It's always fun to try.
אחד מי יודע, אחד אני יודע, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ.
One God.
שניים מי יודע, שניים אני יודע, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. שלושה אני יודע, שלושה אני יודע, שלושה אהבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. ארבע מי יודע, ארבע אני יודע, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ.
5 books of the Torah.
5 מי יודע, 5 אני יודע, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ.
Do you think anybody would mind if we jump to the end, number 13?
Let's see.
Okay, so hang on. There are 12 tribes of Israel, 11 stars of Joseph's dream, 10 commandments, 9 months to childbirth, 8 to the days of circumcision, 7 days of the week, 6 sections of the Mishnah, 5 books of the Torah, 4 matriarchs, 3 patriarchs, 2 tablets of the covenant, and 1 God in heaven.
13 מי יודע, 13 אני יודע, 13 מידיה, 12 שבטיה, 11 קופיה, 10 דבריה, 9 ירחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתה, 6 ספרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ.
So we're now coming to the end of our Seder. And it ends with a little story about a goat. At the end of the story is the little kid, the little baby goat. The Israelites, the Jewish people, after 3,400 years, we're still here.
Chagadia, Chagadia, Dizvan Abba Vitre Zuzei, Chagadia, Chagadia, Ve'ata Shurna Ve'acha Legadia, Dizvan Abba Vitre Zuzei, Chagadia, Chagadia, ואתחל בדשחל לשורה דאחל לגדיה דזמן אבא ויתרזוזה חד גדיה.
So let's skip to the last verse.
ואתה הקדוש ברוך הוא דשחד למלאך המוות דשחד לשוחט דשחד לתורה דשתה למאיה דחבה לנורה דסרח לחוטרה והיכה לחלבה דנשך לשוררה דאכל לגדיה דזמן אבא ביתרזוזה חד גדיה.
49 days from the second night of Pesach that we received the Torah on Mount Sinai. But Patty's going to come forward and let us know as she counts the Omer for tonight as we begin our journey to Mount Sinai.
1.
And we will now recite the blessing over the wine, the fourth and final cup of wine.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Personally, one of my most enduring memories of Seders was when my grandfather, David Dudi, would end the Seder, and my grandfather could not keep a tune or carry a tune if he carried it in a suitcase. But one of the most beautiful memories that I have is of my grandfather singing, "We finished the Seder."
Seder Pesach Leshana Haba B'Yerushalayim.
So I'd now like to call upon our ritual vice president, Phyllis Spector, and she and Cantor Gustavo have put so much effort into this Seder, and we thank them. And I'm going to turn it to you, Phyllis, as you officially declare that we've completed everything we've been commanded to do, and that our Seder is almost over.
Our Seder is now ended, according to custom and law. Next year, may we celebrate again in Jerusalem.
לשנה הבאה, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה, לשנה הבאה, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה, לשנה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה, לשנה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה, לשנה הבאה בירושלים.
We just finished our Seder with the words, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Again, we end this Seder as we did last year with the blessing, next year in person. We have so much to be grateful for. We've made it through, it looks like, the pandemic. If everybody does what they're supposed to do, we will have increased freedom over the next year. I'd like to thank the cantor for his hours and hours and hours of calling everybody, bringing everybody in, and editing all these pieces together. More than 100 of you have participated in this virtual Seder. We also want to thank Phyllis Spector for being his backup editor and advisor. So we are very, very blessed in this congregation to have each other, to have freedom. Let's be conscious of bringing more freedom to the world as we go into this next year. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. L'shana haba, next year, may we be together in person.
לשנה הבאה, לשנה הבאה, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה, לשנה הבאה, לשנה הבאה בירושלים, לשנה הבאה, לשנה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה בירושלים לשנה הבאה לשנה הבאה בירושלים